The polar bear. It is one of the Arctic's most deadly and fascinating creatures, but it is in danger of going extinct. And it's us who's responsible. The ice sheets polar bears depend on for land, shelter, food, and other necessities for survival are quickly disappearing. Not only is this catastrophic for the polar bears, it is also disastrous for us. How do the melting ice sheets affect us? And how can we prevent them from melting any further? Let's find out. It should be no surprise to any of you that global warming is an imminent danger that looms on our future on this planet. The planet has been slowly warming over the course of the Earth's existence. However, research shows that it has sped up drastically in the time of human existence. This is due in part to the rash bullheadedness of humans to believe that they can simply use any resource and as much of it as they want and expect no consequences, which leads to the massive consumption and usage of materials that produce toxic chemicals such as carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. Global warming was once an uncommon term used by a few scientists who were growing concerned over the effects of decades of pollution on long-term weather patterns. Today, the idea of global warming is well known, if not well understood. It is not unusual to hear someone complaining about a hot day or a freak storm and remark, "It's global warming." This raises the question, how does global warming occur? Well, it is due mainly to greenhouse gases. Global warming is caused by an increase in the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is not a bad thing by itself. It's what allows Earth to stay warm enough for life to survive. Although it's not a perfect analogy, you can think of the Earth sort of like your car sitting out in a parking lot on a sunny day. You've probably noticed that your car is always much hotter inside than the outside temperature if it's been sitting there for a while. The sun's rays enter through your car's windows. Some of the heat from the sun is absorbed by the seats, the dashboard and the carpeting and floor mats. When those objects release this heat, it doesn't all get out through the windows. Some is reflected back in. The heat radiated by the seats is a different wavelength than the light of the sun that made it through the windows in the first place. So a certain amount of energy is going in, and less energy is going out. The result is a gradual increase in the temperature inside your car. The greenhouse effect is a little more complicated than your hot car. When the sun's rays hit the Earth's atmosphere and the surface of the Earth, approximately 70% of the energy stays on the planet, absorbed by land, oceans, plants and other things. The other 30% is reflected into space by clouds, snowfields and other reflective surfaces. But even the 70% that gets through doesn't stay on Earth forever, otherwise the Earth would become a blazing fireball. The Earth's oceans and land masses eventually radiate heat back out. Some of this heat makes it into space. The rest of it ends up getting absorbed when it hits certain things in the atmosphere, such as carbon dioxide, methane gas and water vapor. After these components in our atmosphere absorb all this heat, they emit energy, also in the form of heat. The heat that doesn't make it out through Earth's atmosphere keeps the planet warmer than it is in outer space, because more energy is coming in through the atmosphere than is going out. This is all part of the greenhouse effect that keeps the Earth warm. Most people may not know that icebergs in Arctic waters have little to do with rising seas, because the ice floats in the water, already displacing it with its size. As the ice melts, the Arctic sea levels, and thus the other oceans, stay the same, but the weather changes. The real threatened sea level increases come from the Greenland and the Antarctic ice sheets, which contain close to 99% of all the world's fresh water. When the Antarctic melts, climate experts state that sea levels can rise to 200 feet and more. Greenland's melting ice sheet will add another 20 feet to sea level rise. So altogether, the melting of polar ice caps effects would include sea levels rising 220 feet or more worldwide. The National Snow and Ice Data Center says that the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets influence both day-to-day weather and long-term climate. The high altitude tops of the ice caps change storm tracks and create cold downward winds that travel along the ice surface. Arctic sea ice helps to regulate the climate by keeping it cool. As this sea ice melts, heat from the sun is absorbed by the oceans instead of being reflected into space, contributing to warming oceans, water expansion and jet stream changes. Even small temperature changes in the Arctic can drastically affect weather all over the world. Images of emaciated polar bears floating on small ice blocks in the Arctic Sea represent some of the more radical effects polar ice melt has on wildlife. But polar bears aren't the only ones affected. Inuits in the northern hemisphere are experiencing reduced hunting seasons because of increased early spring ice melts. Because they mostly live in the coastal regions near the Arctic, they depend on sea ice as a means for transportation and hunting. As the ice melts, their means to support themselves decrease. Tribal leaders also point to the last few decades, where increased ice melt and global weather changes no longer allow them to accurately predict weather by using clouds, winds, and ocean currents. In areas where the ground has stayed frozen for centuries, as in Alaska and Siberia, melting permafrost is also suspected as the cause of new outbreaks of diseases. Anthrax erupted in a small corner of Siberia in August 2016, caused by melting permafrost. Scientists and doctors theorize more than 2,000 reindeer became infected, and dozens of people hospitalized after a 75-year-old reindeer corpse melted and released the spores across the Yamal Peninsula. Anthrax is not the only virus frozen beneath the permafrost. Scientists posit that the bubonic plague and smallpox are also buried in Siberia's frozen ground. Lands within the Arctic circles also trap methane and other gases when the ground froze. As it thaws, these greenhouse gases get released back into the atmosphere and add to the global warming cycle. So how do we stop global warming from progressing any further? The best thing we as a human society can do is to stop as many carbon dioxide and methane emissions as we possibly can. We need to stop using fossil fuels, stop dumping toxic chemicals, reduce waste, come up with disposable materials such as biodegradable plastic, and use renewable energy sources. There are a lot of things that we can do to prevent global warming from proceeding at its current rate, and none of them are difficult. All of them can be done with determination and a little effort from everyone. Together, let's stop the icy Bois from being warm, and let's save our planet.